Knox Game Design, July 2023, Parallax.
Welcome everyone to Knox Game Design for July 2023. My name is Levi Smith. So this month we're going to be talking about Parallax. This is something I don't think we've talked about before, something that really hasn't been talked about much with 3D games. It's kind of handled for you, but with old 2D games, as I state here in the overview, it gives the appearance that objects in the background move at a slower pace or slower rate than objects closer to the camera. And when I remember first seeing this is like in games like Ninja Gaiden. You see Ryu close up in the front, and then as the camera moves along, then you see the castle in the background slowly moving along. So if you kind of hold like your two fingers in front of your eye, you can like move your head from left to right, and you can kind of see that effect just as a test to see how that works. Another game is Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. I remember you could watch little Mac down here running down the road training, and then the close background moves really quickly, but the buildings in the background move more slowly. So that's basically the concept of parallax. So with 2D games, you have to kind of handle that. I remember in games like Final Fantasy IV, it has the concept of like an overhead parallax. So when you're like on the mountain here and you're moving around, the mountain moves quickly along with your character, but the forest and the ground below moves at a slower rate, giving the appearance that you're really high up on a mountain. Or like when you're in the Village of the Monsters, you could see the lower levels of this village below, but those lower levels move at a slower rate than the ones closer to the camera. And also another thing you got to take in consideration, like the object that your character is on may actually be moving, but the camera is actually like pinned to that moving object. So like if you're on the subway, like here in Final Fight, you don't see the subway car moving, but you see the background, the lights in the background moving very quickly, giving the appearance that you're on a train that's moving very quickly. And also in Bad Dudes, one of my first games on the NES, you're on a truck. So the truck, you don't see the truck moving on the screen, so your camera's kind of pinned on the truck, or it scrolls with the truck, but you can see the buildings in the background moving kind of slowly because they're way in the background. But this little pond behind the truck and the guardrail, it moves very quickly. So you see that moving really fast. So how do you implement this? Kind of talked about it. It's like, okay, you got an X and Y coordinate for your character's position. Then you got an X and Y for the camera's position. So the camera kind of follows along with the player. And then you can draw your objects based on the camera position. And then you can use a factor for each parallax layer in the background. You multiply its position by that factor along with the camera's position to get the correct position for the objects in the background. Like I said, you don't have to worry about this in 3D games. It's kind of handled for you, but if you're doing a 2D game, scrolling game, then you kind of got to put in these extra calculations. So I have a demo here. So I got this just a smiley face that moves along, kind of like in a side-scroller game. You got the ground, which is these red bricks that moves along with the player. You got trees in the background that move a little bit slower, but still pretty quickly, giving the appearance that the trees are closer to the camera. Then you got the mountains in the background, which move very slowly. So yeah, I have a factor of 0.8 for the trees. 1, the bricks, the ground has a factor of 1. So 1 means that it moves at the same rate as the character. Then the mountains in the background, I got it 0.2, means they're really far away. So you can tweak these factors to give the appearance that of these objects either being closer or further away from the camera. Yeah, so let me start up the demo. So I got it in 3 parts, and I'll post the code in the code repository. So the first step, again, using Monogame because it's free, it's open source, everybody can run it. So this was just getting the character moving around, no scrolling at all. And then I got the 3 layers, the trees and the mountains in the background, and then the bricks below. But yeah, no scrolling with this version. Here's the code. So pretty much the same stuff. So I am tracking the position of the player as a vector 2 and the position of the camera as a vector 2, since it's all 2D based. Loading in the content. So we got a player sprite, mountain sprite, tree sprite, and brick sprite. An update. So we're just handling the key presses, moving left and moving right. And then we're just going to draw the mountains, trees, bricks, those 3 layers, and then the player. So in the second example, so this is the demo with no it's scrolling, characters moving along, but this is like really old games with no parallax. This is like NES games with no parallax. Everything it looks flat. Everything moves at the same rate. So pretty much the same stuff. I didn't highlight what exactly changed from the previous one. But you can see that it does track the scrolling position. The position of the camera is the position of the player. Minus 640 to center that up. You really should have a constant and divided by 2 for that. Screen width divided by 2. But yeah, here's the mountains and then the trees. So we're drawing the mountains and the trees based on the position of the camera, and then the bricks and the player. So the camera is just kind of pinned on the player right there. So here in the third example, we actually have the parallax effect going on, so you can actually see the trees, the bricks moving at the same rate of the player that it's walking on or moving along. And then the trees move a little bit slower than the mountains in the background move really, really slowly. So I could have some like clouds and stuff and put them on another parallax layer. But just to show these, here's the parallax floats that I had defined for. So then you can see here when I draw the mountains, I have the position of the camera times the parallax factor of the mountains. Then subtract that from the x position, the total x position. Then same for the trees, I multiply the position of the camera x times the parallax of the trees. Then for the bricks, parallax of the camera times. So I'm just doing this for the x. I'm not worrying about the y, since it's only scrolling left to right. But yeah, you could make the trees move a little bit slower by making this 0.5. If we want the mountains to move really slow, maybe change that to 0.1. So you can kind of play around with these settings and figure out what works best for your game. So you can see here the trees are moving a lot slower. The bricks are still moving at the same rate of 1, and then the mountains in the background are moving really, really slow. Or if we want the trees to be right next to the camera, we can change that to 1.0, and it'll move at the same rate of the camera. Yeah, so you can see the trees move really fast, so it makes it look like the trees are actually really close. And actually, if you had something in front of the camera, I've seen some games, some of the old arcade games, where you might have a pipe or something in the foreground in front of the player, in front of the camera, and also in front of the player, between the camera and the player, so you could have that move at a rate greater than 1. But you'd have to actually draw that in front of the player. Yeah, so that's basically it for Parallax. Just something I don't think our group has ever talked about before. I think it's worth mentioning. Like I said, primarily for 2D games. 3D games is kind of handled for you. But that's going to wrap it up for July 2023. Appreciate everyone out there listening and watching.